Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Lightfall coming out has kind of made my old loadout guide irrelevant, so today I'm going to show y'all what I've been using with the new Armor 3.0 system. Just like my last video, I'm first going to start with kind of the weapons I use, then I'm going to talk about my subclass fragments and aspects, and then finally I'm going to cover my armor and kind of the mods that I choose. Before I start though, I just want to say that I am not a walking encyclopedia on Destiny 2, meaning that it is possible that some of the choices that I make might not be the most optimal or the best. I just play the game at a high level, and this is what I figured out just playing on my own. If I say anything incorrect, please feel free to correct me in the comments. Last time I made this video, I learned a lot from you guys. And finally, if there's anything I didn't cover or if you're unsure of something, feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and I will try and respond to as many of y'all as possible. Alright, so enough of that, let's get into the guide. So first we're going to start with our weapons. Going down the line, we first have Ignition Code, which I think is the best primary GL in the game due to the fact that it is the only GL that can roll my preferred god roll, which is Slide Shot, Proximity Grenades, and Demolitionist. Unfortunately, Ignition Code can be kind of tricky to farm, as it's on a rotating drop from dares. So if you're looking just to get something good to try, a good enough GL just to try out the loadout, then I'd recommend farming strikes and going for a malicious birthright from Zavala Ingrams. Pretty easy to farm and not too much worse than a Godroll Ignition Code. So before we look at perks though, it's important to kind of understand the impacts that Velocity and Blast Radius have on all GLs. Blast Radius is very important in that I'd avoid anything less than 90. Focus on getting this as high as possible. As you can see, I got mine to 95. Unfortunately, I didn't get the Blast Radius Masterwork, but anything above 90 and you're in good shape. Velocity, however, is a little more interesting and less straightforward. Depending on your playstyle and skill level, there isn't really a right or wrong answer on playing with high or low velocity. Most people would just assume that higher velocity is always better, but in reality, that's not really the case. And the reason for this is there's a small window of time after you shoot where you cannot remotely detonate the shot. If you let go during this window, your shot will carry on as if you clicked and didn't hold, which will give you no control over the actual time detonation. This window of time is the same whether you're using either a high or a low velocity. And what this means is when playing with a high velocity, your shots will be easier to land at around the medium to long range, however, much more difficult in the short range due to the timer not letting you detonate when you want if it's during that small window. Low velocity, on the other hand, has the opposite problem, with close to medium range shots being easier while long range shots proving more difficult. The key difference is when using a high velocity weapon, there's no skill gap on engaging close range targets, it's just a gameplay element that is stopping you. Compare this to low velocity, where while long shots might be more difficult, it still ends up becoming a skill gap and not just an archetype limitation. This is why I personally choose low velocity, as I play very aggressively, leading to most of my engagements being kind of in the close to medium range. And I know that's a lot to hear, but I think it's really important that I get this out of the way because a lot of people ask me, why are you running such a low velocity? And I really think it is the better option. Um, but for you, it might not be the better option. Don't let me saying one is a higher skill gap than the other sway you. I'd recommend you try both out. Get your blast radius as high as possible, and then try out both your high and low velocities, and kind of just see what you prefer. So now that I've explained how velocity and blast radius affect the overall effectiveness of a GL, let's look at the second slot where there's only really one viable option, and that's proximity grenades. Whatever GL you decide to go for, this is the bare minimum. Prox nades give up the one-shot kill potential in favor of increased blast radius, making it a lot easier to hit targets for more damage. In addition to this, proximity grenades are the only perk in its category that can stop a GL shot from going through someone's legs. This is especially important for someone like me who likes to aim for bounces over direct impacts in my normal gameplay. I can't tell you how frustrating it is shooting someone directly and having it bounce through their legs and then getting shotgun and teabagged. It pissed me off, and that's why I switched to proc nades. You could use spike nades if you want. They're I do think they're viable. However, I think they're kind of more suited to a single GL kind of playstyle, with a traditional primary like a hand cannon or a pulse rifle. I think with two GLs, you don't really need to hit that one shot potential since you have two. You just need to hit them evenly on both shots, or a combination of both needs to get the kill rather than the instant one shot. So after proc nades, for the two main perks, The first one being Slide Shot. Slide Shot's just beyond broken, and realistically, it never should have been added to a grenade launcher. It completely destroys the balance of a grenade launcher and the fact that you have to reload, and it's just a get out of jail free card. So make sure to take advantage of that, whether it's Slide Shot at ignition, or you can get Slideways on a malicious birthright. Slideways is slightly worse as it doesn't let you spam it as much, but realistically, just getting that one shot is still offers so much value. If you can't get either of those, though, if you're going for a Pardon Our Dust, you can't get Slide Shot or Slideways. Autoloading Holster is another great option, but you're going to have to be a little more careful in how you position yourself to get the most value out of it. And then for the second perk, there aren't really a lot of good options, at least on the Ignition code. So I just went with Demolitionist for two main reasons. The first, generating passive grenade energy on kills pairs really well with my low discipline build. And secondly, throwing your grenade reloads the GL and kind of offers another shot if you need it. So that's pretty much it for primary GLs. So let's go on to the next part, which is the Fighting Lion, the main piece of this build. So, this weapon requires a lot less explanation. It's an exotic, has a static roll, everyone has the same roll, super easy to get. I think it drops from pretty much anything. You kill Dragon EDZ and you probably get this gun. And this will be the main weapon in the loadout. So the fact that Lion uses primary ammo as a grenade launcher lets you use this weapon a lot more aggressively and take more aggressive and risky shots without a penalty of using special ammo. Especially paired with Rain of Fire, you can get a lot of value out of this weapon. And in the future, I'm going to be making some strategy breakdowns on the Fighting Lion and kind of how to get the most out of the weapon. But I've already ranted so much about the first, ignition code, and for the purpose of this build, all you really need is the gun and the catalyst, and you're good to go. So after the Fighting Lion, that only leaves the heavy weapon. And for this season, I'm trying out a third GL over a linear fusion, which I used to use in previous seasons. This one, the linear fusion pairs better with Rain of Fire, giving you Radiant, but I think I've just been having too much fun with Full Court. I think I like a perk that incentivizes you to go for longer range, cooler shots, and I've been having a lot of fun with this. But with heavy weapons, you can kind of choose whatever you want. You can run an LMG, you can run a linear fusion, a GL, a sword. You can run whatever you want. This is kind of down to personal preference, and this is what I've chosen this season. Okay, so I think that's everything in regards to the weapons for the build. I know some of those parts were kind of long, and I'm sorry for that, but I feel like I should address the specifics of actually how these GLs work and give y'all more of a comprehensive guide than my first one. The aspects part will be much quicker, so let's just get straight into it. Starting with the super, first I definitely run Dawnblade over Well. Whenever I run Well, I feel like I'm just a solo super target, and good teams will just run away, and you don't really get too much value out of it. And then in addition to that, I think that Dawnblade, they just got a massive buff over Lightfall. I think it was you could throw 2 or 3 extra swords, and it's actually kind of really really strong right now. Before being a tier 5 super, you couldn't even get it in trials if you're dropping 15 kills, but now you can actually get it. So I think it's a lot more viable now. You can try Well if you like it. I know there's some people who run Well. If I'd say if you're a newer player, Well is a greater starting point. But if you're starting to get the groove and feeling it with the loadout, I recommend Dawnblade. It just pairs so well with the trajectory kind of playstyle. You have a trajectory playstyle with the weapons, and then you also have it with your super, and it's just a lot of fun. All right, so moving on from the super, let's get into the basic abilities, starting with the Rift. So, in my opinion, I think the Healing Rift is the best option. However, I'm saying this without properly giving the new reworked Phoenix dive a chance. So feel free to experiment, but I think the Healing Rift just offers way too much value to ignore. For the glide, sorry, there's not really a decision here. Like, you have to go with Burst Glide. If you choose anything else, you'll be slow, sluggish around the map, and it kind of just goes against everything this build is about. For the melee, Celestial Fire is definitely the better choice, providing just another final ability to secure a kill when you've emptied both your GLs. There'll be times when you're playing when you'll hit someone for, let's say, 100 with light, and then 90 for ignition, and they'll be on 2 HP shooting you with an SMG, and you got nothing, and that melee is really going to bail you out. So it's going to save you in a lot of encounters. Definitely pick this one. Um, and then finally, looking at the grenades, so there's a lot of good choices with the grenades. In season 20 right now, the firebolt grenade is just broken. There's a artifact perk that gives you 2 for free, and it's just ridiculously strong. So that's why I'm running firebolts. Usually I run solar nade because I like the zoning capabilities, um, but other people have used a lot of different nades. There's not really a consensus of which one is the best. It's more personal preference. If I were you, I would recommend, if it's not season 20, then to go between the fusion grenade and the healing nade and kind of just experiment and see which one you like the most. All right, so now into aspects. So Icarus Dash, this is a no-brainer because one, the movement's going to save your life, and two, the dash pairs with Rain of Fire, which reloads all of your weapons on Icarus Dash. Not much more to say on this, just pick it and move on. The second aspect, though, is a lot more controversial. So I personally prefer Heat Rises over Touch of Flame, just because I've really gotten used to shooting while gliding. I've been playing Top Tree Dawn since Forsaken, and that's always been an aspect of Top Tree Dawn that I've enjoyed. I think Touch of Flame probably offers more value, more impactful value by buffing grenades and having a burn. But the fact that burn doesn't actually kill, um, and just how much I enjoy the feel of Heat Rises. I don't even use the grenade part of it to float very often, but for me, just the way I see the game, I'd rather have the game feel better overall and my movement feel more fluid than just get some powerful ability that might get me a one-off gimmick kill. But for you guys, I'd probably recommend Touch of Flame. But try out Heat Rises because I think it's really really cool. There's no other build in the game or no other subclass in the game that lets you do this, and I think it's just a really fun way to play the game. So try out both of them, choose what you prefer. The final part of the subclass build is the Fragments, and I'm going to start off by saying that these aren't really too set in stone, and you can kind of choose what you want, but these are just the ones that I picked. So the first one is the Ember of Mercy, which is mainly for the plus 10 discipline to get me to a triple 100 build. I will say though that the restoration from Revive and Fire Sprites has actually been pretty noticeable too. So I definitely go with this one. It's very strong. The next fragment is the Ember of Searing, which again is for the plus 10 recovery to my stats. This one, the actual perk aspect of it gets a lot less value than the previous one, but plus 10 recovery is big for me, so that's why I picked it. The third one is Ember of Beams, which I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, is to get my intellect up to 100 for my triple 100 build. But I will say if you are running the Dawnblade Super over well, then you should definitely run this because the tracking on this is actually super aggressive and very strong. It takes a little bit to get used to. It can kind of mess you up sometimes with tracking through walls and stuff, but very, very strong. Give it a try. And then finally, the last one I picked is the Ember of Solace, which just increases the effects of Radiant and Restoration. Not amazing, but definitely helps. Alright, and finally, since I'm already on this screen, you can see down here, this is my stat distribution. So I think I accidentally said Discipline for this one. I meant Resilience. You know, Resilience, Recovery, Intellect are the three that I chose to get 100 on. In terms of my priorities for what I think you should do on your stats, I think 100 recovery is the bare minimum. You have to have it. Even if you have everything else at 1, you have to have 100 recovery. Way too powerful. Um, Resilience and intellect, on the other hand, I'd say both of these are about equal. Resilience is way better with the 40% reduction on my last build, but that's been nerfed down to 30%. It's still really powerful. I still have engagements where I live with 1 HP where if I had 90 resilience, I would have died. And I think just giving yourself every chance to win a gunfight every microsecond is just really, really important. So resilience is probably my second, but intellect's also very good. Domblade got a buff; it's very strong. Uh, Looking at discipline and strength, these are pretty low, but as I've already said, earlier on, my discipline is boosted by my ignition code with Demolitionist, charging my discipline passively, and then my strength is charged passively by getting kills while gliding, thanks to heat rises. So that's why I can kind of afford both of these being pretty low. I still feel like I get a lot of value out of my grenades and melees, and I don't feel like I have a super long cooldown or I never get them. And then finally, mobility. I prefer 20 mobility, in the twos, from 20 to 29. You actually move faster with lower mobility because your mobility affects your jump height, and when you're using burst glide, the fastest part of your jump is the start. So if you're lofting yourself or if you're floating a little bit on your jumps with a higher mobility, you're not hitting the ground as much, and that actually slows you down counterintuitively. So it's a weird mechanic. I'd aim for 20 to 30. You don't really need to, with a normal primary weapon like a hand cannon or a pulse, you kind of want your mobility to be higher because you're strafing. Icarus Dash gives you a lot of that strafe value, and even at 20, I still feel like I can strafe pretty well. So, and in addition, you want to level up your other stats. So mobility is definitely something you can go on, you know, not really care about and let go away. So that's my personal opinion. Other people, some people like discipline over intellect, which I can respect. I just think having your ult or your super on a 4-4 round in trials is just way too important to give up. And, I think it's just way too important. But choose what you want. This is what I chose. All right, so we are in the home stretch now. I've gone over the weapons, I've gone over my subclass. Time to look at the armor. So the armor with the Buildcraft 3.0, I feel like it's honestly a step down with this loadout compared to the old system. I feel like it's a little less powerful, but I'm just going to go over what I got, and a lot of these mods could be different. I'll tell you if it's something I think is really important or if it's, something that you can experiment with. So go down the list, we'll start with the helmet. I've gone with a resilience mod just to get my 100 resil. I've gone kinetic and void siphon here. This is just for, getting kill, double kill with line or double kill with primary. I could get orbs of light and I can chain those, get my super a little faster. And I just went with hands on because I didn't really see any other things in here that get a lot of value with. So that's the helmet. For the gloves, I've gone with the kinetic loader and double void loader. Once again, I don't really think that there's a lot of other options. Some people like fastball. I personally don't. So if you like fastball, you could probably swap out one of these void loaders. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but this is just what I went with. Like I said, this whole new system feels kind of limiting. So I've just gone for the bare minimum. On the gauntlets, I've just gone with reload speed. For the chest plate, there is honestly nothing here. This emergency reinforcement, I don't even know if this works in PvP or not. I just put it on because everything else is actually just useless. These unflinching void aims don't do anything. It's like maybe it does something, maybe I take a little less flinch. Flinch is not really an issue when using this loadout. You're not getting your screen's not shaking around. Maybe on console you might get more value out of this if you're running controller. But chest plate, there's really not anything super important, so not much to talk about there. Rain of Fire, so I guess I'll go over what this exotic does and some of the mods that I chose. So first, you can read down here, whenever you Icarus Dash, it reloads all of your weapons, which is honestly pretty crazy. I'd still use this thing if it just reloaded one. And then kills with fusion rifles and linear fusions make you radiant. And then, it buffs your airborne effectiveness of fusions and linears, but that doesn't really matter for this build. The main thing is when you reload it, or whenever you Icarus Dash, it reloads all your weapons. And you compare this with Fighting Lion really, really well. And, it just makes you a demon with this loadout. It's ridiculous how powerful these things are. Lots of value. I used to use transversive steps, but, these things are just insanely powerful. Very, very good. Farm a good roll for these, and you're going to love them with this build. So actually looking at some of the perks on here, instead of just, what the exotic does. Recovery mod for my build. I will vouch recuperation till the end of time. I think this is one of the best mods in the game. The amount of times that this has saved me, you get a double kill with GLs, and then an orb drops. You pick up that orb, you get half your health back while someone's already shooting at you, lets you get that third kill. It's the amount of value you get out of this thing is ridiculous. Very, very powerful. You at least have to have one of these. And then the other two mods I just went with Absolution, just because it'll give me a little bit of energy for all of my abilities. Not super amazing, but like I said, this new system's kind of restrictive, so I went with that. And then I just went with Orbs of Restoration as well, just for a little bit extra boost. Realistically, I've been considering going Better Already or Double Recuperation, but this is what I've gone with so far. Honestly, if this was worth 1 energy, I think I might go with the 1 energy. I think I would go with Better Already over this, but I just feel like with the 2 energy, I want to, if I have 2 slots, I'll just use a 2 energy thing. Doesn't make sense, but that's just kind of how my brain works. And then finally, the Bond. I've just got a minor Rezo mod. I don't need much of a boost, so that puts me over. Then I got Reaper, Distribution, and Bomber. Reaper is really, really, really powerful. Distribution, I might honestly just go with another Reaper. I'm going to do that right now. Because Distribution, I think, just sucks. Like, you have to be near targets. Just getting it's just bad. Don't get a lot of value, if I'm being honest. I think Double Reaper was bugged at the start of Lightfall, which is why I had that. It might still be bugged, but I'm gonna go with Double Reaper and then Bomber just left over. Okay, so I think that's everything. Talked about the weapons, the subclass, the armor, the boots. Here's my ghost shell if you want to see it. I mean, I'm just joking, but that's it. I know it was a long one, but all you guys who stayed to the end, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to actually watch this whole video. I spent a lot more time on this one than I did on the last one because I wanted to make sure that I explained things clearly and effectively. Last time I think I just kind of winged it. Um, it's one of those things. When it comes to YouTube, I just play the game, man. I'm not a YouTuber, so if there's things that you see from my gameplay that you think I could improve on, please let me know. I'm always open to hearing feedback from you guys. I'm always open to hearing better ways I can do things. Even if it's just a little thing, let me know. You won't offend me. I'm all ears. I think that's the best way to improve and give you guys better content. So thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. If you have any questions about anything I said in this video, leave in the comments. I'll talk about it. I will respond to you if I can, hopefully. I definitely will. Just might take me a little time, so bear with me. Um, and thank you again for watching. You have a good rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this. See you guys in the next one.